Hi, good morning. My name is John Kelley. I'm a senior product manager at TripAdvisor.com here in Boston. Actually, we're based in Newton, Massachusetts. And Jeff and Seth have invited me to come back and speak about our summarization user-facing feature that we have on the website related to accommodation reviews and how we can better present the vast amount of review information in a clear and concise manner for our travelers who consume this information on the website. So it's a quick agenda. I'm going to go over, for those of you that don't know our business model and background, what is TripAdvisor, the problems that we've been are trying to resolve here, which is sorting through so many reviews for the traveler to kind of get what they're looking for from those reviews to help with their trip planning. Some early research and proposed solutions that we work through. And then some testing and evaluation that we did with those proposed solutions to try to arrive at the best outcome for a feature that we can present to users. And then going through our addition of our use of sentiment along with the summarization feature itself and how that proved out to be an impactful way to guide the user through not just presenting them the right information, but what kind of the nuances were behind the user's opinions for those facts and opinions that were presented, and kind of looking at what's next, which has been kind of the state of trying to further move the summarization feature along so that we're continuing to evolve that. So TripAdvisor is the world's largest travel site. These are updated stats as of a couple of weeks ago. So we have over 50 million unique users worldwide. This is our geographic breakdown of where most of our traffic is coming from. We even exceeded our parent company, which we've spun out of earlier this year, Expedia, as far as the volume of traffic and content on the site itself. So we have over 50 million unique users per month. 20 million people have actually gone through the registration process and have established an account on TripAdvisor. There's over 60 million travel reviews and opinions that are part of our corpus of information that we present across hotels, restaurants, and attractions, as well as within our user traveler forums. This stat here, the 40 new contributions permitted every day, has actually climbed from November, which was about 25.3 contributions per day. So the volume of information that we're actually getting into the system is incrementally increasing. Currently, we have over 600,000 hotels listed on the website, 198,000 attractions, 858,000 restaurants, and 108 geographic destinations worldwide that basically the site is structured upon. We're a geographic-based travel site, obviously, but we also have our information and location information distributed out through those geographic entities. This is more of a curiosity. This is our first review that was posted in February of 2001. This is actually for the Captain's House Inn down in Cape Cod, which is very close to here. And from there, we've grown to the 60 million reviews that we have, or 60 million reviews and opinions that we have on the site today. So here's the problem. We've heard a couple of people reference the Bellagio. The Bellagio is our probably most popular property that we have on the site today. Las Vegas is obviously an international travel destination for a lot of folks. It's a very large property, so we have a lot of people going through there that will come back to TripAdvisor and post the reviews. The slide's actually a little bit out of date. We're showing 5,056 reviews that have been contributed over the past 7 years. That's actually over 7,000 reviews as of today. So this has added an additional 2,000 reviews since the end of last year. But with all these reviews, it's hard to really figure out what does all this mean to me as a traveler. I might be very unique in my approach to being able to select a property. I might have a family, I might be traveling alone, I might be going away for a romantic weekend. I have different questions that I'm trying to answer, and sorting through those reviews and trying to figure out really what is important to me and what other travelers found important as they were going through their traveler experiences is a real difficulty. Again, we're very rich in the type of content that we have, but being able to kind of tease out the facts about what is happening at that property, its location, what are the unique aspects of that property, and how did people's opinions change or evolve or be met as they experience their in-trip, from an accommodation perspective of staying at the hotel. But we also want to look at this same type of feature for our restaurants and attractions locations as well, because that is, again, there's more user-generated content there as well. We can filter on things. We have a histogram here with the overall rating from the travelers, of being able to slice the information in different ways to look at what's really good about the property, but most importantly, what a lot of travelers want to find is what's really bad. What are the things that people didn't find to delight them, or that they had difficulty within the travel experience. And then we can also filter by traveler type. But even so, it's still the cross-section of both of those types of filtering. It's still, you might be still faced with over 1,000 different reviews dating back in time, 6 years, and it's still kind of hard to sort through all of that information. So we initially looked at a variety of different approaches to kind of tackle the problem itself, but all with the focus on being able to present something in a concise manner on the website itself that would make sense to the 80, trying to cover the 80-20 rule to 80% of our travelers without a lot of difficulty. We looked at human editing and algorithmic solutions. We looked at a word cloud of terms as a UI for presentation of this information. Looking at recent review titles, interesting sentences, helpful votes for the properties themselves, style clouds. Then we started to look at different third-party tools of looking at concept fragments, or being able to look at strongest emotive opinions on the site itself, and then looking at faceted identification and breakdown of the information that was part of the reviews themselves to try to map it to different types of taxonomies that would make more sense to the users as they were trying to go through the selection process. This is a screenshot of a test rig that we ran internally that looks at a variety of different approaches of ways that we broke down the information. Obviously, there's the word cloud. There was some interesting sentences here, some snippets of information that we saw clustering in, and basically ran this across the team internally of about 500 different employees, and had people provide us the best vote on the types of best experiences that we were able to arrive at, and looked at the evaluation of that information. So what do we learn? Human summaries are rated twice as good as other algorithms. I think we've heard that probably 4 or 5 times in the last 2 days, that we can take the technology only so far, and humans can only go so far. So there's some intermingling of the approaches from both ends of the spectrum that will arrive at the best solution. But we didn't really have any killer application. We didn't have any killer output from this that was really the auto-summarizer that we were looking for. And initially, I was hoping to have something that would just digest all this information and show me a paragraph of 5 or 6 sentences, and I could read that, and that would be the review summarization. But it doesn't really work that way, because it's really hard to pull, again, a lot of different writers' styles, their grammar, their approach to how they're structuring the reviews together into an easily coalesced picture for what the property is going to look like. And again, it's going to represent a very mishmash of different opinions, and I'm not able to really dig into that singular paragraph to really find out some of the nuances of questions that I may not even have at the top of my mind right now, but want to ask over time. So we kind of had a good picture of where we wanted to go, but we need to figure out kind of what the next steps were at this point. So we looked at some beta testing and usability testing of these different approaches with external users, and then we did some additional testing on the live site to come up with some hard data, because we're very data-driven, and being able to sort through this to come up with the best outcome and the best approach. As we were going through these types of evaluation, especially with the live site testing, we're looking at impacts on bounce rate, in particular, and engagement. Commerce is part of the bigger puzzle. We do want to see people convert based on the information they're collecting, but actually, if we do our job well, in a lot of cases, they may be steered away from a particular property because they're not seeing what they're looking for, and they may switch to a different location to be able to book, or they may delay their decision at that point as part of that session. So there's some subtleties in the data itself that we wanted to take a look at to be able to arrive at a logical conclusion. But especially with user experience, there's really no hard or specific metric to look at. So that's very subjective, too. So it's kind of it was a mix of different ways that we were testing this, and ultimately we were looking at ways to just make a good decision on where we wanted to go. So one of the first tests we did was we took a list of, I think it was over 100 different properties, and we had put the reviews for the past 3 years in front of a group of internal folks, product managers or interns that we had available at the time. And we analyzed those, and we pulled out the 5 to 7 of the most interesting sentences from those reviews themselves as a representative sampling of what the overall reviews for that particular location represented. And the editor just used his best judgment. Now, this wouldn't be transferable into a long-term solution, although it was considered, but we don't want to editorialize our content either or have the appearance of editorializing that. We want to kind of stick to the verbatims that our reviewers are providing, so that we're really reflecting what the travelers are saying, not what any external influences might be into the opinions presented. We've put a simple voting mechanism in place for this. Now, the voting mechanism said that 91% of the users had liked this feature, but it's also directed towards those people that have a propensity to vote for little widgets and things like that to show up on the site. But at least they gave us some directions where we were going, that people found this at least useful. There was nothing to engage with at this point because it was just a series of sentences, but at least gave us an indication of like, oh, we might be on the right path for this. But there was no significant impact on commerce, and there was no real direct impact on bounce rate. But again, it was a user satisfaction an opinion that was more relevant at this point. So then we took that same type of summary content, it was actually part of the same process that we went through to sort through those sentences, and tried to put them into buckets of advantages, disadvantages. Again, best judgment in putting them into the two different areas. Voting widget on the site. There was a positive impact in commerce at this point. People did like it. We did see some uptick in the way that people were converting. The bounce rate actually increased. This is getting back to actually doing a better job at helping the user to digest this information. Where this feature actually appears is on our hotels detail page, which is a highly indexed SEO page. So a lot of traffic is coming in sideways. So the user may be coming in from a search from Bing or Google, look at this page, we're seeing the summarization feature and making a decision at that point and then going back out to Google, not necessarily digging deeper into the site. But positive at least directional outcome from this. We then put together a pretty simple concept algorithm. We looked at two-word concepts, and we looked at the scoring and account of occurrences that occurred on site, looking for basically considering that the more that people would be saying about these different things, the more important it might be to those users and potentially additional travelers that might be viewing the information. At this point, too, we were also able to do an engagement feature that we were able to link directly to the content, so that we were giving the user a clustering of the counts of the concepts themselves on site, but also linking it directly back to the reviewer who originally authored the review itself to provide context and further information for why they made this type of statement that we were trying to summarize. Still had the voting feature on site, still found useful. No significant impact on commerce at that point, and bounce rate was neutral. But again, customer satisfaction and the opinion that we were seeing through internal usability testing was high. This also gave us a place to baseline our engagement rate, because this is the first time we had an engageable feature on the site. And the overall click-through rate, although I can't divulge the exact metrics for our PR and legal teams, which is kind of a pain, but at least it gave us our baseline point that we were at. And I'll have to say it was pretty good. And it would be something that we would, even at this stage, would have kept on the site. But we wanted to see what additional testing we could come up with and additional changes. So what we learned up until this point was that people like to see the polarity. They like to see what was good and bad about the property. And they like to see the content kind of consumed and digested for them. A lot of our travelers that will come to the site are either doing deep research where they might digest a lot of reviews themselves or do a lot of filtering. They're our researcher persona, or they're a quick flyby user that might come in sideways or go to a specific property with the site itself and just have some type of confirmation of like, this place is just not going to suck when I get there. And they're going to be able to book that. They're on a business trip, but they're going there with their family, and they just like, okay, this is good enough. I got to get this thing booked because I have a million other things to do. And that's kind of the mentality that they have. The phrases were better than the two-word concepts themselves because they were able to convey the tone, and there was better context for what was being said. But the occurrence rate of the longer phrases, because you're trying to match these across different users, is obviously hard to come up with. And we get into the point that we were trying to find representative statements, which are useful, but again, how do you prove to the user that a lot of people are kind of referring to the same type of concepts within the content? It was also hard to detect the tone or the sentiment of the concepts themselves because they were brief, and even within the context of the snippet that we were extracting it from, that conveyed part of the sentiment, but it removed it from the context of the full review. We also saw a propensity for users to almost over-engage with the feature, that they were potentially just clicking on a bunch of concepts and trying to digest as much information as possible, thinking that they would be able to dig deeper and come to some different conclusion. And this, obviously increased the time on site and engagement with that, but we weren't necessarily seeing the types of conversions that we wanted to help drive the users towards. And then through usability testing, we looked at 2-word and 3-word concepts and really arrived at at that point that the 2- and 3-word n-grams that we could generate using this simple algorithm would be a good first step, and that overly complex implementations of presenting almost too much information or a more complex UI would not really lead to a better outcome at that point. So we decided to kind of settle on a very simple approach for the first phase. So this was built off our an internal algorithm which we call the TripAdvisor Top Concept Summarization algorithm. We built a concept generator. Just goes against English. Initially, just went against English language reviews. We looked at properties that had a minimum of 50 reviews updated in the last 24 months, looking for that recency horizon, as well as enough reviews for the particular property to have it to make sense to try to extract the concepts from the content itself. We were displaying a minimum of 3 concepts and a maximum of 10 concepts per property on the detail page. And we built a tool to actually manage the concepts themselves, because we were to essentially whitelist concepts that we didn't think were too nonsensical to the user to present, and got rid of a lot of mentions of entities that were not directly related to the property, that we weren't able to generalize across a lot of different locations as well. The initial pass allowed us to generate a summarization feature for 25,000 different properties and present these on our hotels pages. And a lot of these properties were, because of the volume of reviews that were there, good and bad, were part of the top properties on the site itself. And we initially just rolled this out to our 6 English language points of sale out of the 24 points of sale we had at the time. The next step was to take the same type of approach and try to bucketize these concepts into advantages, disadvantages, like we'd seen in a previous test, to kind of provide that polarizing feature for the user to be able to see the good and the bad. What we wanted to do is we wanted to manually add sentiment by reviewing those concepts in the context across all, basically just looking at the concept itself, and if it was very good, well, that's a positive sentiment. But very good doesn't really tell you a lot, but it was very good was behind that. There was the very good food, very good room, very good service, and poor service, bad experience, 2-word n-grams, kind of nonsensical to some sense, but it was engageable by the user, because like, what was bad service? What was that about? What was the next thing that they were able to kind of dig into? And then we started to obviously a discussion with Lexalytics a month or 2 prior to this, and initially talking to them about the use of the sentiment engine to add sentiment to the concepts themselves, and then also exploring further the use of the text extraction engine to improve on our overall concept algorithm. So we rolled this out to the 6 English sites. We didn't see a significant impact on commerce, although there was a little bit of noise in the system, which was hard to really detect the overall impact. And the bounce rate did increase, but it was only increasing marginally. It was an acceptable increase that we could basically we could live with at that point, because we will trade off certain metrics for an improved overall user experience, and the fact that a traveler will essentially have a good experience on the site itself and return at a later date to hopefully we'll have another opportunity to serve their needs. At this point, with the feature rollout itself, we saw a 2x increase over our baseline click-through rate, which was great. So we're incremental improvement, not too deep. Wasn't a lot of effort to really get here. It was more a lot of my time and a single engineer's time to get to this point, along with working with our content team to kind of sort through the concepts. But a good enough feature that we wanted to maintain this on the site. We then did an additional test of looking at 1,000 properties that we were able to extract the concepts from. This is where we eyeballed the sentiment based on those different concepts and basically put them into the advantages, disadvantages buckets here. But the same, because it was a quick test, we wanted to get this up and running within a week or so, and then there's a lot of data analysis to go through all these concepts for these 1,000 different properties. Again, as I was saying, we made a generalization of the sentiment for the concept across all the properties, which is not, I mean, it was good enough for the test itself, but it wasn't necessarily an accurate reflection of the sentiment that we were able to expose there. Again, bounce rate increased marginally, but not necessarily beyond where we were initially. So it was, again, within an acceptable range. No real impact on commerce. Usability testing, we saw that it was an interesting feature that a lot of travelers would engage with and they found very interesting. But we saw a 3.5x increase in our baseline click-through rate at that point. And the breakdown was that a lot of folks were really looking at the disadvantages, which we thought was very interesting at this point, that they, because there's actually a feature that's not displayed here of advantages, disadvantages. There was an other category based on a very high clustering of concepts that might be in that bucket. But, and as we had heard time and time again, usability, they want to find out what's wrong. Like, why shouldn't I spend my money at this location? They were all trying to figure out, was there bed bugs? Was there, street noise that you could hear from your room? Was the hotel staff rude? They were trying to dig into those different areas. So then we wanted to look at, okay, well, we need to figure out how to add sentiment to these concepts, and we need to be able to do it across the 25,000 properties, and we better figure out an automatic way to do this because we don't want to editorialize this in the long run. So we used Salience to go against the same 1,000 test properties themselves, looking at the same types of concepts. But our approach was a bit out of the realm of the way that we should have done it, because we were looking at the concepts themselves, and we were looking at the summarization snippets that appear within the window itself, and trying to detect the sentiment based on just that smaller section of text, which, in retrospect, and I'll get to that in a moment, wasn't the best approach in that regard. But even so, we did see that the users were looking at this in these buckets. We were doing a better job with the sentiment and being able to surface that to the users. And again, we're looking at a lot of users still engaging with the negative as part of the content itself that they found the most interesting part of that. So what happens here is that we went and added Lexalytics to this. Well, we had to back away from the sentiment in the advantages, disadvantages bucket. Just as this feature was wrapping up the test, we had a lot of feedback from hoteliers because of the polarizing nature of the two different buckets and the subtleties in the content itself. And as we were looking through the test, we were looking at these different areas. We were only looking at a smaller segment of the content. But as we started to dig into the content deeper, this isn't the best UI to present to the user itself, because you really have to nail what's an advantage and what's a disadvantage. We really have to ensure that that is a true representation of what the user's opinions are. And I think we might have overextended the fact that we were trying to say advantages, disadvantages. We might have said something, what is positive or negative. There was probably different labeling that we could put on the feature itself. But there's really, as you look at the reviews themselves, I've looked at thousands and thousands of reviews on TripAdvisor now, if the overall review is positive in many, many cases, I would say almost 95% of the time, the overall review is usually pretty positive, unless they've had a really horrendous experience. There will be aspects of the review that are negative about certain things that occurred on their trip. It may be unrelated to the property that they stayed at. They might have had problems at the airport, or Aunt Edna's wheelchair got stuck on the path, or in Punta Cana someplace. Those are the things that people talk about as they're travelers. But it was unlikely that we would ever be able to actually present this type of feature to users because, as ideal as it would be to present the user with this kind of very specific guidance of what's good and what's bad with the property, the user ultimately needs to be able to evaluate what the reviewer was writing, the context that they were writing it in, and arrive at their own conclusions. So, where we wanted to go from here was we actually paused on adding sentiment at this point. We moved to increase the coverage and the rollout of the summarization feature. So we actually changed the rules a little bit. We're looking at only properties that had 25 reviews. That gave us enough clustering of content to be able to extract the information from and going back 36 months. So that generated 46,000 concepts. I probably said there's about 55,000 concepts that are published today out of over 120,000 concepts. There's a lot of noise that our algorithm was generating. We've translated those English concepts using machine translations as well as human translations into our 21 different points of sale languages. And this is an important feature as we've rolled out our content across the globe now, that as we're continuing to collect native language content in the different points of sale, we've at least seeded the ability for the users to view some content about properties that has been translated as best we can into those native languages, kind of as a starter piece to kind of get people engaged and still provide services to the emerging points of sale as we build up the business. And again, as I was saying, the advantage is not the right user experience because of the polarization and the concept sentiment. We really, as we started to think about this and understand the nuances of sentiment within content itself, it has a different strength and intensity that also needs to be exposed to the user to give them a better sense of what's really going on there. So, and then I had to go back to my day job. So that was about 11 months ago. We ended the testing. We've been working with Lexalytics, and we just haven't been able to evolve the feature to kind of the next step. Now I'm hoping I've got engineering resources that I can work with, and my own bandwidth is now constrained again. But we're going to continue to move this forward. And really what we're looking at is the next step now after looking at a series of data sets that we've processed using Salience 5, which was really a rich in feature sets that we wanted to take advantage of. So we needed to kind of wait for that to be available as well, is that our facet attributes is probably the best initial approach for us to look at as well as the next evolution of the feature. Especially if I can map those, in which I've already pulled together our taxonomy that is accommodation specific, and being able to map out for the user what's interesting or what is important to them related to the room, service, the food, the location, the people, the geographic nuances to the property itself, I think will be a good experience. One of the challenges we have, and has been one of the big challenges I've faced since this project rolled out, is really how to keep all of this rich information into a really tiny spot on the screen and to be able to expose this in a way that's going to be interesting and powerful to them. And as much as the information that we can actually generate out of the system itself, out of Salience, I would love to have this really geeky screen with lots of charts and being able to show kind of this drill down feature and being allow the users to provide this power to them. It'll service a very small portion of our user set and it won't be generalized enough. So I need to kind of figure out the balance between those two different areas. But the sentiment piece is still something that we want to expose, again, to provide that relevancy and connection with the original reviewer of the content. Because people, the travelers that we see, and we hear it, because the usability testing is our real face-to-face, or not even face-to-screen interaction with users and hearing how they're experiencing the content itself. They have a connection with the reviewers. And the connection is so strong that because they've made a decision to go stay at a property or go visit an attraction or go visit a restaurant while they're in their in-trip experience themselves, they almost feel compelled to come back to the site and provide a review for the next person that's put into the same position that they were in to be able to make those types of decisions. So we need to work on the right visualization UI. We've got some good starts in that area. The other thing, beyond facets and attributes, because that'll prevent that factual information along with some opinion nuances in the attributes themselves, but really trying to get into what's the unique thing about the property that no other property in that geographic location has, or what is something it's just so, it's the infinity pool, it's the lazy river, which is these water features that are in a lot of large resort areas, or the water slide, or there's a kids club, or there's the Michael Jackson animation show it's like the best animation show in Punta Cana or something like that. And how do you know where those things are? And you can read through the reviews. We need to be able to find a way to bubble those up and make them available to users so that they can kind of look at the richness of all the content itself. And then beyond accommodations themselves, get this out on restaurants and attractions, which is not part of our core feature set, which we're really known for, but it's a very important part of the overall travel planning experience, and to be able to also summarize those reviews, because the content for those areas of our site is also continuing to grow as well. And I think that's it. Can I answer any questions?
Hi there. So I want to start by saying it seems that you and your team have a really impressive amount of knowledge as to how people are conveying sentiment in the reviews about the properties. And it sounds like one of the big challenges with the hotel properties is that people are conveying sentiment not specifically about the hotel, but about other things related to their experience that the hotel was part of. Where you're looking to extend this to restaurants and attractions, do you think you'll come across the same problem there, or is it possible that it's going to be a little bit easier with the way somebody talks about their experience at a restaurant being different from the way they would talk about it at a hotel?
I think that's a good observation, that I would expect specifically for restaurants. Restaurants is a short period of time. I've consumed food, which is a very personal thing to go through, and people's opinions are very strong when it comes to that. And I have not even had the opportunity to summarize restaurant review information, but I'm highly curious to do so because of that nature. Attractions is kind of it's different in the fact that attractions are a group experience, whether it's the family or it's like you've gone on a duck tour, or you've gone on a mountain climbing expedition, or you've gone on a Segway tour, and it's again for a period of time, and either they like it or it's not, but there's a different story to tell. The restaurant reviews are specific about the dining experience and the ambiance within that restaurant confines. The attraction reviews can be, it's a much broader sense, so it's more colorful in the way that they describe the aspects of what happened in the attraction itself. And as you were saying, that or as I had pointed out, I guess, within the accommodations themselves, you may be staying at that hotel for a 7-day period of time. And that tends to seed the mindset of the reviewer to talk about the whole trip in that although, every once in a while you'll see the traveler that's like, I don't know if they're German or whatever they are. There's like listing out exactly nothing against Germans. They're just a very interesting user base along with a couple of other nationalities. But it's like exactly the way that I would want to summarize it. The review is put into that type of context. So it's again very, very variable as far as the type of content that we have.
So when you were extracting those, those two-word things, were you using the themes from Lexalytics? And if so, how much did you have to tweak the default part of speech great expressions.
So we haven't actually exposed themes on the site as part of those tests. We haven't been able. That's the thing I'm trying to get to. So those were just our concepts, and it was a very simple algorithm, just looking for those patterns. I mean, the one reason that we wanted to get to Lexalytics, or I wanted to get to Lexalytics, is there's a tremendous amount of overhead in the generation and the curation of those concepts because they are so noisy the way that we're pulling those together.
Hi, it sounds like you are having a problem balancing, and this is typical of e-commerce, right? The needs of the user and the needs of the e-commerce sources of revenue. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, the advantages obviously boosted use of the site, and yet they irritated the hotel owners who wanted no disadvantages and all the advantages, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Can you talk about that?
At the end of the day, my charge is the user experience. Myself and my team is the user experience for the core site. And the one thing I can say is I have the ability to make that a priority. I mean, commerce, we need commerce to survive and generate revenue, obviously. But we, as a company, are willing to make that trade-off in the right user experience, knowing that our users and travelers that will continue to engage with us, that is improving their overall experience. I mean, it's the right thing for us to do. So, I mean, it's a wonderful place to actually be as a product manager to be able to say that. Any more questions? Great, thank you.